Episode 3. How Children Learn to Remember Tomorrow. Children noticed first. They always do. Not because they are wiser or purer or closer to some invisible truth, but because they have not yet learned how to ignore what does not fit. Adults are trained to smooth the world.
Children let it remain uneven.
After the day the bell did not ring, after the unremembered began to walk among us with their startled eyes and sharpened days, the schoolhouse changed. No one announced this. There was no decree, no meeting, no rewriting of the curriculum. But the teacher, who was no longer Irina, who had long since died remembering things that never came, began to hesitate before speaking. The pauses grew longer, the silences heavier. She would ask the children to close their eyes and wait, the way it had always been done. And sometimes, often now, nothing would arrive. At first, the children assumed they were doing it wrong. They tried harder, they furrowed their brows.
They pressed their hands flat against their desks.
They leaned forward as if leaning could pull tomorrow closer, but memory does not respond to effort. Memory responds to openness, and some days the future did not arrive at all. When this happened, the teacher would clear her throat. "All right," she would say, too brightly. "Open your eyes." The lesson would move on, but the children had already learned something. Something no one had intended to teach them. They had learned that tomorrow was not guaranteed. It was the youngest ones who reacted most strangely. Children under 7 still lived half in the present, half in a kind of continuous now. They had not yet developed the habit of projecting themselves forward in clean lines. For them, the absence of memory was not frightening at first. It was confusing. A boy named Elio raised his hand one morning and asked very seriously, "If the future doesn't come, do we still have to be ready for it?" The teacher did not answer right away. She looked at his face, earnest and unafraid, and something in her expression shifted. "Yes," she said finally. "We do?" Elio nodded, satisfied. But the older children, those on the edge of becoming something else, felt the change like a betrayal. They had already begun to rely on memory as a kind of railing along the staircase of life. Now, the railing was gone, and they were expected to keep climbing. We noticed it in the playground. Children who had once played without caution now hesitated. They argued more, they fell more often. They cried harder when they did. Without memory to soften the landing, experience arrived at full force, and experience unannounced can be brutal. There was one child who did not hesitate. Her name was Mara. She was 9. She had dark hair that refused to be tamed and a habit of listening more than speaking, as if the world itself were a conversation she did not want to interrupt. Mara still remembered tomorrow, not always, not reliably, but often enough that the other children began to notice. They would gather around her during breaks, watching her the way one watches a clock without admitting it. "What will happen next?" someone would ask.
Mara would shrug. "Maybe nothing," she would say. Sometimes she was right.
Sometimes she wasn't. But what mattered was not accuracy. What mattered was that something still arrived. The teachers debated what to do. Some argued that Mara should be encouraged, trained, protected. Others worried she was becoming a kind of oracle, a role that would isolate her long before she understood the cost. In the end, nothing official was decided. This too had become common. We were living in the aftermath of certainty. It was Mara who first articulated something we had only sensed. She did it accidentally. One afternoon, while sitting on the steps outside the schoolhouse, she said to another child, "The future comes easier when you're not afraid of it." "What do you mean?" the other child asked.
Mara picked at a splinter in the wood.
"If you want it too much," she said, "it hides." That sentence moved through here quietly. It appeared in conversations, in letters, in the margins of notebooks. The future comes easier when you're not afraid of it. We recognized the truth of it immediately, because fear had been thick in the air since the bell. Fear of losing the gift, fear of becoming like outsiders, fear of living without rehearsal. Fear, it seemed, had made the future cautious. But there was another child, a boy named Thomas, not the same Thomas whose papers had burned, but named for him, as so many were. Names like memories echo. This Thomas was 10. He had once been exceptional. He remembered small things easily, the color of a door he would pass tomorrow, the exact phrasing of a sentence someone would speak next week. But after the bell, his remembering stopped completely. Unlike Alina, he did not grieve it. He rejected it. When the teacher asked the class to close their eyes, Thomas refused.
"I don't want to," he said.
There was no defiance in his voice, only clarity. The teacher hesitated. "Everyone else is trying," she said gently. "I know," Thomas said, "but I don't want it back."
That should have ended the conversation.
But it did not. "Why?" the teacher asked. Thomas looked down at his hands. "Because when I remembered," he said, "everything felt already used." That sentence reached us like a blow, already used. As if life itself had been borrowed in advance, as if experience, once remembered, lost some essential freshness. Thomas became a problem. Not because he misbehaved, because he refused. He would not participate in memory exercises. He would not listen when others shared what they had received. He would cover his ears, not dramatically, not rudely, just enough to remove himself from the sound. At first, the teachers tried patience, then persuasion, then concern. A recorder, one of us, was sent to speak with him. I was that recorder. We sat across from each other in a small room with a window that looked onto the river. Thomas swung his legs slightly, not nervous, just restless. "You know why I'm here?" I said. "Yes," he said. "Because I'm wrong?" "No," I said. "Because you're interesting."
That surprised him.
He stopped, swinging his legs. "I don't want to remember," he said again. "If that's what you're here to fix." "I'm not here to fix you," I said. He considered that. "Why does everyone else want it so badly?" he asked. I thought of Alina, of the unremembered, of the archive filling with absences. "Because remembering makes us feel prepared," I said. "For what?" he asked. "That's the trouble," I admitted. "We don't always know." Thomas leaned back. "When I remembered," he said, "I felt like I was watching my life instead of living it." I said nothing.
He continued.
"I knew when people would leave me," he said. "So when they were still here, I didn't let myself need them." The room felt smaller. "I knew when I would be hurt," he said. "So I started hurting myself early, to get used to it."
He looked at me then.
"Is that what being prepared is?" he asked.
I did not answer.
Because I did not know. Word spread quickly among the children.
Thomas was refusing the future.
Some admired him, some feared him. Some whispered that he was dangerous, that if he refused strongly enough, the future might stop speaking altogether. Children have a talent for myth.
But myth in here has a way of becoming instruction.
Something else began to happen. Children who could not remember tomorrow began to invent it. Not in the sense of fantasy, but of story. They told each other what might happen. They argued about possibilities. They imagined different endings, and this was new. Before, imagination had been a secondary skill, a pleasant accessory to memory. Now it became central, urgent, a replacement organ. The schoolhouse filled with arguments, with laughter, with speculative futures that had no authority beyond desire. Teachers struggled to control it, recorders struggled to understand it, but the children were adapting, and adaptation is a form of intelligence adults often underestimate. Mara and Thomas became unlikely allies, she who still remembered, he who refused. They spent long hours by the river, throwing stones and watching the ripples interfere with each other. "What do you remember today?" Thomas would ask. "Nothing," Mara would say, sometimes smiling, sometimes not. "And tomorrow?" Mara would shrug. "What do you want it to be?" she would ask instead. That question frightened us more than any memory ever had. The incident, the one that forced us to acknowledge what was happening, came quietly, as all irreversible things do. A group of children were playing near the water when one of them slipped. It was not a dramatic fall, not deep, not fast, but the current was strong that day. Mara remembered it a moment before it happened. She remembered the hand reaching out. The weight pulling down, she shouted. She moved, the child was saved. Afterward, trembling and soaked, the child said, "How did you know?" Mara opened her mouth to answer. Then she stopped. Thomas was watching her. She said carefully, "I didn't know, I guessed."
That was a lie, but it was a merciful one.
That night I recorded something I had never recorded before, not a memory, a decision. I wrote, "The future is no longer the only teacher." I did not know then how much that sentence would cost us. In episode 4, I will tell you about the day someone tried to forget deliberately, not a child and an adult, and what happened when forgetting became an act of rebellion rather than loss. Until then, remember this, if you still remember, the future may choose its listeners. But the present is learning to speak back. And the children are fluent already.